Woo.
Ooh. And we are live. And thank you everyone for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair and popping. Oh, I can't even. That shows you what kind of day it's been. My lid didn't even come off my beer. What the heck? Well, my not your father's root beer. But anyway, thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and enjoying our podcast tonight and listening in as we talk movie spoilers. We're kicking off a new month. And yeah, our month is He's Not Loki. Yes, that's right. We are looking at 4 Tom Hiddleston films where he's not playing Loki. It happens, folks. Don't feel surprised. It does happen. And tonight we're going to be looking at the 2015 surreal film called High Rise. And with me tonight is a wonderful group of individuals to talk about this, which I have a prediction. I know how one person might feel about this. I'm not sure how I think the other will feel about it. But first off, she's back with us in the spoiler room. It is none other than Kara. Hello, Kara. How are you?
Oh, sorry,
Hey.
that's a dog.
Oh, your dog wants in on it too. Hey.
No, I'm doing all right.
Good
Glad
to hear.
to be back.
She's just here for that scene with Tom Hiddleston on his porch where he just is wearing a book and a smile. But no, anyway.
I thought you were going to say the scene where he's on the porch with the dog.
You were tempted to rewind. She was going to rewind that bit. She goes, wait, I'm not quite sure I got the editing of that scene correct. Let's check that again. Actually, I saw the scene and I'm like, holy damn. But anyway, yes, also with us, coming back for more, my right-hand man, the one and only Mr. Ian Simmons. Hello, Ian. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
And yeah, Tom Hiddleston is a fine man.
He holy crap. I'm like sitting there going, the one scene where he's just wearing a book and nothing else, and I'm just like, well, now I want to go to the gym. I feel like I have to go to the gym. I feel like I gotta go run or something. Or, as I'm eating popcorn and watching this, I'm like, I'm like, this is damn good kettle corn, but wow.
You trade that in for some kettlebells.
Kettlebells. So tonight, High Rise 2015. Kara, would you be able to give the synopsis of High Rise, if possible?
I'm not sure if I understood it well enough. I didn't quite get the symbolism, but Tom Hiddleston moves into a new building. Apparently, it's supposed to be very posh and elite. And it doesn't take too long before everything takes a downturn. It usually, what was it? It started with a party that just got out of hand and it just went downhill from there.
It was the loss of power, actually. Yeah. The party and a loss of power. A simple thing, like a loss of electricity. And yeah, it suddenly becomes Lord of the Flies for adults in this building. That's actually well put, because you ain't kidding about the symbolism and metaphor and messaging. And man, watching it, my brain was trying to wrap its head around it, but there's parts that I got, and then there were parts where I was just like, okay. I didn't think it was bad, but at the same time, I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, what was your initial feeling on it, Kara? Was it kind of like, hey, this is good? I'm not quite sure what's happening, but
yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. This was a first time watch for me.
mm-hmm.
So I watched the trailer beforehand just to know what to expect, but I would say right off the bat, the horse in that roof garden was the most surprising part of it, and the goat.
Yeah. What about you, Ian? You said you watched like half of this when it like hit video or whatever, but never went back to it.
Yeah, I think if I recall correctly, when this came out, I think I got like an awards season screener of it. And I used to do this with some friends. We'd get together for an afternoon, just like binge watch screeners to catch up on what we hadn't seen.
Sure,
And I
sure.
think we started watching High Rise, and then I had to like leave and go do something else. And so I never finished it. But part of that is because the first hour that I did watch, I'm like, I don't like this is not good or interesting. So I forgot about it. And then you brought this up as a perfect opportunity to find out what I've missed. And I watched the entire thing front to back today. And my thought is, this is not good. This is not interesting. So nearly a decade on, and my opinion holds true.
Wow.
Yeah, it's weird because, talking about not being able to wrap your head around it, this is partially, I watched in 3 separate chunks today,
Yeah.
interspersed with like waiting for the kids to get up and then lunch break. And then after the kids go to sleep and, just finding the time to watch it. And I found my attention like wandering. And so I'm like, did I miss something? Who cares? So I went to Wikipedia after it was over and I read the full synopsis. This is based on a novel from 1975,
Right.
and the movie takes place in 1975, which I hadn't quite picked up on. But I'm reading through, I'm like, oh, this makes a lot more sense. And I'm more engaged in reading the Wikipedia synopsis than I was during the entire 2 hours of Ben Wheatley's movie. I should say it's thematically consistent because Wheatley, a few years after this, did a movie called Free Fire, which had another like celebrity loaded cast, including like Brie Larson. And the whole conceit was a whole bunch of like underworld criminals and maybe some cops find themselves trapped in a giant warehouse and they just start like shooting each other. It's like Reservoir Dogs on steroids. Ben Wheatley came to present this movie at the Music Box in Chicago. And I hated the movie so much that I got up and left 10 minutes into his Q&A. I'm like, I can't listen to any of this nonsense anymore. I don't care.
So in other words, you're saying you're just not a fan of Ben Wheatley's style.
I am a fan of his style. I am like, when I watch his movies, I'm like, man, he really pulled all this together. He got some great talent. He's got some great ideas of how to set up shots and production value and all that stuff. Like the story of how he made Free Fire, where he modeled the set in Minecraft in order to save on some like physical production
Sure.
element. It's great, but like when it comes down to the story and the characters, I'm like, this is all just empty. It's one of those things where it feels like he wants to make a statement without understanding anything of what he's talking about.
Ooh. What would you say, Cara? Would you say High Rise is one of those to where he's trying to make a statement, but he's not nailing the landing?
I would agree. I mean, I was kind of struggling to make sense of this, and at some point I'm just going to watch all the weird pictures and see what happens next. But it feels like a cross between a period piece, futuristic dystopia, something.
Yeah, because you're right. It's got the 70s aesthetic, all the costuming. I mean, the one guy is a documentary guy, so he gets a camera because at one point, that was Wilder, played by Luke Evans. He plays this documentarian who is a partier, a womanizer, but he has a pregnant wife at home who also has 3 other kids. I think it is 2 or 3 other kids. But he's one of those where he's got a project in the works. So, but he's not really, they're making just enough money because the whole structure of the High Rise is a representation of class. If you miss it at all, it's about class warfare is what it at its core it's trying to be, because we have the upper level folks who are your hoity-toity type of folks, the rich, pinky up type of, hey, the people on the lower floors are those that work for those in the upper floors. Our man, played by Tom Hiddleston, Dr. Lang, who is a physiology teacher, a professor, he happens to get an apartment that's dead in the middle because there's like 50 floors, I think, for this
40
or 40. He's a little bit above. So if you look at it from the class standpoint, he's upper middle class of sorts. He dresses higher, but he makes decent amount, but he's not like the very rich folks, like the architect who lives in the penthouse. But he doesn't, he can afford that level versus the lower levels. And so when the power goes out in the lower levels is where things start to fall apart, because it's your essential workers basically who stop working, which throws the upper level into a tizzy because they're not quite sure what to do. And then there's something going on. Yeah, there's a lot of things presented. Drawing the lines between them. Now, I'm not the brightest bulb on the tree. I'm not exactly the deepest lake. But even for me, it was kind of like, I really want to know what you're going for here, but I it's not quite there for me. It's almost like I may have to watch this again down the road to get it, but I think there's chunks of this film missing. Did you feel like that, Carl? Like there's chunks, like they jump quite a bit ahead amongst events, don't they?
Um, yeah, I mean, it escalated quickly, and it's kind of like, okay, well, it doesn't really feel like there was much story development. It's just as soon as the movie started, you're just thrown right in, and there really isn't enough time to catch up or really figure out, okay, well, you told me a little bit about this person and that person, and other than observing them, what are they really about? Or I guess maybe it was just meant to stay shallow, just same as everyone else who lives in that building.
That could be. Ian, do you feel like there's like chunks of this film like they cut out or missing or something, or is he pulling a Christopher Nolan? Yes, I said that, where he's jumping. He's not jumping around in a timeline, but he jumps quite a bit ahead, even though this is actually only supposed to take place like over the course of a few days. It feels like, I have no
It
idea.
I think it's a few months from the
Is it a few
time that
months?
he's because the beginning where he's like barbecuing the dog and all that stuff.
Mm.
I'm pretty sure there was a title card said 3 months earlier when they
Oh,
switched
that's
is
right.
when
You're
he's
right. You're
moving
right.
in. And
3 months. That's right.
Hmm.
Yep. You're right.
but I will say it still feels like that's way too long a time period for the events that we see, because it feels like, oh, maybe this happened in a week, but because you're right, they do keep jumping around. But uh, I feel like some of that truncation of time is just to make room for all the weird imagery and montage and crazy stuff going on. I mean, I got so bored of watching people have sex, and this is me we're talking about. Okay. Um, but it made me really curious about the novel, because apparently, if Wikipedia is to be believed,
Mhm.
this is like a beloved novel by, I think, J.G. Ballard.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm wondering what was lost in that translation, because I'm looking at this movie, I'm like, this is not a smart film. It
I
came
think
out two
smart.
well, it came out 2 years after Snowpiercer. And
Sure.
this is
Yeah. Yep.
essentially, if
Uh-huh.
like, what if Snowpiercer was not on a train? I'm like, well, then it really doesn't work, because people can just leave the apartment building. And you see people going out to work and coming back. And only at the very end does some guy, one of the rich guys, go out to work and he gets jumped and killed coming back in. But I'm like, why does nobody think to leave? You see shots of the kind of the world outside. And yes, this is one of 5 high rises in this kind of a giant area. But you can see, like, in some of the outside shots, out of the corner of this building, you can see in the distance pastures and small towns and more industrial towns sort of closer. So it's like, just go somewhere else. I'm not saying you have to, like, and I'm not saying it's easy to find an apartment, but like when society that is collapsing in the building you're in, it's like when a fire alarm goes off, you go outside until things, settle down. It just, the whole thing made no sense. On top of that, I've never seen, well, I guess it was 1975, but they had modern electricity. Was there a need to have several hundred candles, not like little candles, but like the long candles you see in like a Hammer film, like in candelabras and stuff at the end, because they needed light, because all of the lights had gone out at a certain point. I'm like, this doesn't feel true. Feels like art decoration rather than plot.
Well, and it's you want that narrative in here, and the narrative is a bit disjointed because we do jump ahead in events. I mean, we've got Lang, who seems to lose it fairly quickly by living in this apartment. He tries to mingle with the rich folk in the upper levels. He's invited to a party, in fact, at one point by Royal, played by Jeremy Irons. Jeremy Irons playing, go figure, a heavy, because who would have thought that? But he's the architect guy. He's kind of full of himself. The whole idea that the high rise is, he's built 5 of them around a lake, and they're the fingers and the palm, and the lake is the palm, and he looks at the building at like a social experiment, almost, in a way, by having lower class, his term. But folks who your blue collar folks at the bottom of the wrong levels, and then as you go up the high rise, you get to higher tax brackets, basically. And he has a wife who is saying she's eccentric is understatement. But he invites Lang to a party, and it all hinges around a party. I don't know if it's maybe a European thing or British thing, but this thing, it starts really with Lang getting rejected at a party that he was supposed to be making connections to, because Royal invites Lang to the party, but didn't tell him it was going to be a period party where everybody dresses up like nobility, which, and I think the filmmaker's trying to make the statement here, and maybe it's from the book, but it's like Hiddleston shows up in his suit and everybody else is dressed like old British royalty.
Right. I mean, it very much is a kind of almost like something you see in high school. Like, you don't tell the you don't tell the nerd that it's a special dress up day, so he shows up wearing something ridiculous. Or you say, oh, it's the 18th century high class party. Come dressed as your favorite tutor.
Yeah.
But all the jocks and the cheerleaders show up in the regular clothes, so you get the one guy showing up in a powdered wig. Ha ha ha. This is almost the reverse of that. But what I don't get is that, yeah, Lang is upper middle class. He lives on the 25th floor out of 40. So yes, literally he is upper middle. But if he shows up in a suit and there's all these other guys, I just don't feel like the upper crust people here feel so juvenile that I don't believe that people of that stature would bother trying to prank someone they don't know. And in fact, if you've got a physiologist, a respected man of his profession showing up at your party, I feel like the people of the upper crust would be fascinated by him and want to talk to him and engage him. But that gets back to Wheatley, and I think it's Amy Jump is the screenwriter. Their whole thing is like, rich people are all conceited, idiot, monster cartoon characters. And ironically, they write as if they've never met a rich person. They're making a movie with fabulously wealthy British actors.
Yeah, that they are. Though I think it wasn't so much the fact of Royal was pranking him, he was pranking his wife. He used Lang as a joke to his wife, and it didn't quite work. I think that's what his motivation was. But Kara, this first event with the party is kind of where things start to take a downturn, because that's when the night of the power outage too, I think, in the lower levels. What do you think of this whole scene with him getting to the rich party and not dressed for it?
I mean, it kind of just seemed more like they were trying to paint the whole picture that he's literally not on their level. And it kind of makes him look like that's all he could afford to wear. So
right.
Which
a
they
really nice expensive suit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I really like Tom Hiddleston. I liked his performance as Lang. This character, I got behind his character, even though I might not have followed everything that he was experienced. I was getting behind him because his character is a guy who lost his sister, and he he's trying a fresh start. Part of the reason he's at this high rise is because he didn't want to be in the city and remember things with his sister and that. So you almost get the feeling, though, this guy, they don't paint Lang as a guy who has high ambitions to get to the upper floors. He's actually kind of comfortable where he's at on the floor 25 versus, and I think this is maybe what the filmmaker was kind of going for, is Lang is a guy who's kind of comfortable where he's at, living in a building to where most of the people do not like where they're at. Even the upper crust people don't exactly like their lifestyle, though they like it better than those on the lower floor, but they don't even like each other necessarily. But Lang is that guy who's kind of in that middle where he doesn't have an ambition to get to the higher floors. He's happy where he's at. And so he gets caught up, no pun intended, in the middle of things, and that's what they're kind of going for. Is he was kind of looking at the party as maybe being an opportunity to better himself a little bit, and then once he gets embarrassed, he smashes the penthouse elevator. Which, by the way, if you design an elevator, it should withstand at least one punch. I know Hiddleston's strong. I mean, we've seen the musculature of the man. He's an amazing individual, but he punches the seat and he just like cracks the mirror right away. And yeah, I don't know, Kara, do you think he was also trying to go for that something, a little thing? And of course, there's the double meaning of losing power in the lower floors, electricity wise, maybe losing power as well. But do you think he's just showing how fragile our society is, that one little thing could suddenly start people being, starting to revolutionize and eat the rich, so to speak?
I mean, I was kind of leaning towards that, but the fact that it broke so easily, it also made me think, well, this thing is cheap, and people who actually, some wealthy people actually do tend to be penny pinchers, but they could definitely afford a higher quality glass. But that's just my thought. Is I just thought, well, this thing is just cheap. It's flashy and cheap.
Yeah, the high rise is flashy and cheap. It ends up being not as, it is not as prestigious as Royal thinks it is, I think, in what it is.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing looks like a prison.
It
then
does.
the inside of what is it? He has those silver padded wall, just very institutional.
Mm-hmm. It is kind of institutional, though. The apartment that we see Lang in, you look at it going, this doesn't look like much of a regular apartment. You're right. It looks like a cell in many respects. Go ahead, Ed.
I'm I'm formulating a thought because, Cara, something you said reminded me of the Towering Inferno, and the idea that there's this high-rise apartment / business center. It's all state-of-the-art, also in the 1970s, and the owner trusts his designer and materials guy that he gave him all this money to build this state-of-the-art security and safety and all that stuff, but the contractor dude did it all on the cheap to save money, because that was also the instruction. I feel like that could have been something in this movie too. Not necessarily that Jeremy Irons' character was misled, but what if because something else that you said about how penny pinching, doing it on the cheap. I would buy that if the elite were not also living there. Because I feel like they would demand, elevators that work and top quality materials. If they were somehow able to construct it so that everything worked and was pristine and up to code and very sturdy on the upper floors, and then as you get down, it kind of degrades to the point where they're living on top of an actual slum, that would have been interesting. But I think there was a line in the movie about how each of everybody who lived in that building paid the same price to be there. Like all the units cost the same. It's just a difference of who actually lives in them, because just because you can afford to live in a place doesn't mean that the rest of your life is easy.
Right.
And especially if you're paying tenement prices and you're a multimillionaire, then you're really getting one over on everybody else. There's just so many ideas here that just kind of like I would like to see explored rather than, again, another montage of, hey, look, it's another drunken orgy by the pool.
Yeah.
Well, you had the thing where so you had the hoity-toity costume party. You have the power kind of go out, and so the lower levels have a party. And suddenly the rich folks are like, well, they can't out party us. And so they have an even bigger party. Meanwhile, the electricity is still not getting fixed. Those on the lower levels refuse to work until things do get fixed. So you have simple things like garbage piling up, food not being replenished on the grocery floor, things falling into disrepair fairly quickly. And I think, again, I'm a shallow puddle, not a lake, but I think what he may have been trying to go for with this statement is how fragile the capitalist system is. Because you're right, everybody, according to the one line, seemed to be paying the same amount of money to live there, and that was one of Royal's statements. It's not exactly clear, but later on he talks about how he thought maybe he included too little, but instead he may have included too much because things just society within this microcosm that is the high rise just crumbled so quickly. So it makes it sound like he was trying to go for equality, but realized maybe you do need that separation, which isn't exactly a great statement, but.
Well, I mean, most, I shouldn't say all, but most movies that try and offer a critique of capitalism, and that's definitely what this movie is. It's clumsy and not well thought out. I mean, the movie literally ends with Toby, the little boy, listening to a recording of Margaret Thatcher talking about, the oppressive nature of state power. And so the whole idea,
if state capitalism, then you won't have growth. You need the growth. You need to put the capitalism in the hands of the private folks.
right?
I think.
And that's the critique is like, yeah, see, the wealthy people, they screwed everybody over, but they need government, to regulate everything. But the problem is when you have state control over the money, that's what people are railing against now, and it's called fascism. So it's, pick your metaphor and commit to it is what I say. But here's the thing, like, at least with Snowpiercer, you had the conceit of the world is ended, everything's covered in ice, and you have this perpetually moving train. So you have a closed system that you literally cannot leave. If the building is in disrepair and garbage is piling up and you've got riots, you also have a fabulously wealthy elite who I would assume have telephones. A lot of them do actually leave the building to go to some, kind of a job or other, hire private security to clear out the slums, hire private, maintenance people to come and take out the garbage. Like, they're acting as if they're not living on the outskirts of London, which they literally are. There are construction crews working on other buildings, like, I don't know. It's hard to tell at the scale. I don't know if it's a mile away or whatever, but there's people around. Like, this should not be happening. It's all happening because maybe Irons' character is allowing it to happen. As Luke Evans points out, a guy jumps off the building and no police come. What's up with that? We never find out what's up with that. And that's a big question that I had watching this movie. I'm like, this, like Snowpiercer, is a metaphor in search of a plot.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, maybe it could just have to do with everyone's only concerned with themselves. They're so self-absorbed. No one bothered to call the police and they didn't even explain who took the body away. Like, did the coroner get called? I mean, it just poof.
Right. And you've got I would accept what you're saying, Cara, if this was an experiment where we've got like maybe 50 people living in a building, but these things are massive. You got 40 floors and they're these huge structures. So you have to imagine there's several hundred families living in this thing. No one calls the cops. Do they try? Do they get intimidated out of doing it? Like, what's the deal here? Again, I'm thinking about how This movie is trying to say something about people, but it doesn't actually stop to think about how people would actually react in this kind of a situation.
Yeah.
Well, at one point the cops do show up and they ask Royal if anything's going on, and he's like, "No, we can sweep this under the rug." You know,
Uh-huh.
sweep,
Yeah.
sweep this under the rug. And I think maybe it's trying to give that comedic beat of the absurdity, because the parking lot at this point in the film, when the cops actually do finally show up, at least when we see them, they may have showed up before, but this is the first time we actually see evidence of law enforcement swinging by the high rise. And we see Royal talking them into sweeping it under the rug. There's literal fires in the parking lot. Garbage is everywhere. It's like, how exactly do you sweep this under the rug? Like, I mean, just how much money is Royal paying? To which we get the impression that it's not even Royal's money, it's his wife's money. Because she was going to go live with Daddy because things fell apart in the high rise. And that's when he hits her, which is another turning point in the film, because and this is what I found fascinating is the dynamics change amongst the characters as the film goes on, because where you have these various structures of society and class, suddenly the women and children are banding together. It doesn't matter what level they live on, they've suddenly banded together because the guys have gone batshit crazy. Wilder is literally going to animal grunts, at some point, and the boys, the rich boys, are like, well, we're manly men, we could do this. We could just walk right down there to the grocery store and beat the crap out of people and take the food because it is ours, because it's our right. And the women suddenly are taking the children into a secluded area. You've got a variety of different levels, because at one point Royal's wife gets kidnapped, though you don't see it, it's just talked about, and then suddenly she shows up and she's being tormented by the lower levels. And then Wilder's wife, who's pregnant, by the way, ends up getting kidnapped by the rich guys and taken to the upper levels. You have in here Helen, who is all-knowing, but also rather promiscuous person in the building, who has a dark secret, who ends up getting beat to crap by Wilder.
And worse. That's
worse.
Yeah.
You're not quite sure why. Maybe because Wilder has gone so feral, so to speak.
Well, I mean, in their first scene together, and that's the bit where Hiddleston was kind of sunbathing on the lower deck, and she's seen him, and Wilder's there with her on that upper deck, and he's she rejects his advances, and you get the idea that he's been kind of seeing her or hang around her a lot, and she's just not interested. So I think that he used the proverbial end of the world as his chance to get information about Jeremy Irons. He finds that out, but and also to kind of have his way with her, which is great. It's a real hero we got here.
I mean, I kind of think it could also be just showing how everyone just bit off more than they could chew. They're living in this very expensive building, supposedly, as you said, they're all paying the same amount, so they're all forced into being the same, except some people are house poor. The documentarian and the wife, they're just barely hanging on, and he becomes this agitator or a loose cannon, and just he's all over the place. Out of everybody, he's the most out of control.
Yeah.
There's a better version of this movie where, for whatever reason, they are cut off from society. They have only this building, and they have to make do with some kind of a disaster. And the lower class, poor and middle class people, they have to make do because they've always had to make do.
Mm-hmm.
And the upper class people rip themselves apart on the upper levels because they've never had to work for anything. They don't know how anything works. And, a spirit of cooperation erupts among the lower and middle class people that doesn't quite make its way upstairs. Then you have it's not necessarily a message I agree with, but I think it's something more palatable and coherent with whatever it is we have here, because everybody just goes insane. There's not a level-headed person in this entire building. There's no sense of cooperation, working together. No one's saying, this is not the time to party. We need to get out of here, or we need to work to make this building work. Yeah, I know
Mhm.
the whole thing of like, yeah, we're going to go on strike because screw the rich, but they actually still have to live there too. Yeah, again, none of these people act like people.
Uh, well, I think there's supposed to be representation of certain aspects, I guess. That
But
that
people
could be
aren't,
it.
that's the thing, people aren't aspects. Like,
Mm.
I've never met a cartoon character who consistently displays, the trait that you associate with them. There's some dimension to everybody, and I understand sometimes in film you have to exaggerate, but that's why you need that balancing force so that the audience has a way in. Because if you're trying to say something about the human condition, you need to put humans into the story in some capacity. Otherwise, it's just like I'm 2 hours. I'm sitting here watching all this stuff, going, "What's the point?" And I still had that question after it was over.
Well, what's the point? That's a good question. Cara, did you find any purpose for the film? What was presented? Do you have a point that maybe was trying to be made by the film?
I I wish I did. I was spending more time than anything trying to figure out what was really going on and why.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, even as simple as how Ian said, it's people could have gone out and they could have gone to a different grocery store. If they were able to afford it, they could have, gotten a motel room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think if anything, that is what hurts the film. I like the concept. I like the idea. I like the themes going on. The fact that, yes, Luke Evans' character, the guy who goes the most off the rails, last name is Wilder.
Hmm.
Subtle.
The guy at the top who's designed all this, his name is Royal. Okay, I mean, we aren't being subtle here, folks, with some of this. Um, but I think if it was put in the context of, say, and I hate saying it, but a post-apocalyptic world, kind of like Snowpiercer, or just some kind of secluded area in the middle of nowhere where this was designed, rather than it being so close to where all their jobs, even the lower and upper class, they all were in the building as well. If it was completely self-contained, I think it would be a little bit easier to buy into all the events that happen. But the fact that it's not, that they do show them heading to jobs, and then you get this weird thing to where Lang goes out to the parking lot and there are no cars, and it's not even like a dream sequence. He goes out to the parking lot where there were all the cars, and suddenly there's no cars there. He goes to the middle of where this buildings are for the Palm, where there's supposed to be a lake and it's concrete. Um, but they can leave, and we've seen them in the real world, at least Lang. And I think that is, if you take this building and put it in like an island somewhere to where civilization hasn't gotten to it and it's all self-contained 100%, I think what happens is a little bit more, you can buy into it a little bit more. Um, the fact that it doesn't, unless they're making a statement about your government not caring about what happens to society, they could be making that statement.
I don't know. They all cling to this building and what it means to them so much that they're refusing to leave. But the fact that they just everything went haywire after stuff stopped working, that part really doesn't
Uh,
really make sense to me.
and yeah, that's the thing, is the crazy goes from zero to crazy in like 2 beats of the movie. It's not like an escalated thing. It's like there's the one thing that happens. Suddenly there's this wild party in the lower floors because there's no electricity, so they decide to party, where there's drugs and everything. Wilder beats the crap out of a guy who Lang ends up doing a CT scan of and go, hey, by the way, yeah, you don't just have damage from the punch that Wilder gave you. Yeah, you got, they don't say it, but you figure it's either brain cancer or a tumor or something. Because he's the guy that takes a header off the bridge and I think lands in Lang's car. I think that's Lang's car that he lands on.
Oh, worse yet, and this is according to Wikipedia. So I didn't pick up on this detail in the movie, so maybe it's in the book
Yeah.
or both, and I just didn't catch it. But that guy, yeah, was it Monroe?
Monroe, yeah.
Yeah. He lives in the same building as Lang. He kind of he kind of recognizes him, and he was also at the party, and I think he was one of the people who was ridiculing him.
Right. Yeah.
And so, turns out that when Lang gave him his results back, he told him he had whatever terminal illness it was, and he didn't.
And see, and I think, and that's what I figured. In all honesty, even though it's not presented that directly in the film, I figured that's what it was because he looks at the brain scan, realizes whose it is, and he kind of smiles and he chuckles a bit when he looks at it in the film. Tom Hiddleston plays it with just a little bit of like a devilish Loki smile, if I dare say. And then that's when he tells the guy, and I'm like, is it for real or is it not? It's hard to say, you know, and Lang didn't quite like Monroe, and suddenly Monroe takes the header
Because that's the thing
party.
is like when he looks at that brain scan, I'm like, I don't know how to read a brain scan. All I'm seeing is a picture of a brain. So I don't know if that smile is I'm gonna fuck with this guy or I'm happy that he has a terminal illness. Either way, like it's one of those movies where, yeah, we meet the protagonist at the beginning and he's clearly gone insane,
Mm.
and we kind of watch him deteriorate throughout the movie. But after the first like maybe 10 minutes of him moving into the apartment, he just becomes grosser and grosser. So that by the end, if he's supposed to be our middle class kind of bridge between the two,
Mhm.
strata, I'm like, I can't root for anybody in this movie. He's no better than the architect or any of those people, those weirdos that he's hanging out with, because he would do something like that to somebody who played a prank on him.
Yeah, and later on too, Lang ends up having sex with Wilder's wife.
Who's like 25 months pregnant, by the way. The only thing worse than the fake belly on Elizabeth Moss was her bad British accent.
Yeah. Well, then she got kidnapped later for whatever reason to be a servant upstairs. I'm not sure why they picked her. Maybe because she was Wilder's wife. It was hard to say why they picked her.
I mean, my assumption would have been she's easier to catch because she's carrying a load with her, but
that could be. You're not wrong, because by that point in the film they've gone kind of crazy at that point. So in their logic,
the one bit of restraint that I was surprised was the way that Wheatley films this, and Elizabeth Moss is being carried up these steps by these two guys, and they're rough handling her, and she's really struggling and screaming at them. I thought for sure they were gonna like get her up to the top of these steps and like dump her down the side and kill her and the baby. I'm really glad that didn't happen, but yeah, that's kind of a testimony to I think the grossness of this movie, where I'm like, this is a very strong possibility.
Yeah, no, I thought for sure that's what they were going to do is dump her, like take her to the top and then make a statement by dumping her down the well. So they get her, and then they also get the other woman, is it not Charlotte? Was it Charlotte or Anne? Who was the one that was the mother of Toby, who had the dark secret with
Helen?
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, no, she was the one who was pregnant, wasn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Or was she the one that was the promiscuous one? It was kind of hard to tell. I mean, not hard to tell who the was. I forgot her name. I think it was Yeah, I forgot her what her name was. I apologize on that. I thought it was maybe Helen.
Oh,
No, Helen maybe was not the pregnant one. She
oh
was
yeah,
the one.
Helen was the pregnant one,
Yeah,
and Charlotte was
Charlotte. Thank you.
Sienna Miller's character.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So Sienna Miller, like I said, as things deteriorate, the mothers and that they take their kids and they all put them in one area to where they're going to be safe. They capture Helen and they take her up to be a servant to the rich. And then Royal also gets Charlotte, who comes to go to like almost like a women's shelter within this building after she gets the crap beat out of her by Wilder. And then she's suddenly up there serving Royal. It's weird how things go because we jump so much around that it's hard to, there's not a real, now I don't need my handheld, but I need a little something of why suddenly this person's here and this person's here and this person's doing this.
And the only thing I could think, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Cara.
Yeah, I mean, to me, what made sense of that scene was they had said they were rotating wives, so it probably just came around to, well, you're a woman, get your butt up there and cook something. I mean, we don't care that you had been previously abused. You're still female, so get in that kitchen.
Yeah, they looked like they were doing something else up in that room, like with plans and drawings. I don't know what was going on because
they were too. Yeah,
because when Wilder gets up onto the roof finally, or to that deck with the grass and everything, he ends up shooting Royal, and right after that, and this is where I completely got lost and checked out for the final time, is all of the wives. I mean, it's very artistic. I love this scene because Toby is looking through a kaleidoscope and he sees what happens to Wilder. All the women gang up on him and start like mercilessly like stabbing him all like Julius Caesar style. But I'm thinking, why? Because Royal's wife is among that crew. I think she might get in the first stab, and like there's all these people who should hate Royal and be thankful that Wilder showed up to deliver them, unless they think that he is more of a threat to them than Royal was. I don't know.
I think the whole stabbing of Wilder by the ladies is because the majority of them I think in some capacity, some of them we get on screen and some of them I think is implied, at one point or another were hit on or treated or something by Wilder. But then I'm a guy, I don't know. Cara, what do you think with this stabbing, the ladies coming to stab Wilder? Do you think it was because at some point he may have either tried something or done something to each one of them?
It's possible. It just had never crossed my mind. I just thought that they were fed up with all of, his running around and causing problems here and there. And I think that's all it really was, is just more of the frenzy and people just being sick of him.
Or they may have been taking out the other alpha. I mean, Wilder gets killed. Royal gets killed. And then they're like, well, then Wilder could possibly move into Royal's spot, really, if and so they kill him instead. Hence, like you were saying, Ian, the plans and that they were having, it's almost as if the women were coming up with their own plan and idea of how they were going to have things redone in the high rise without Royal. They were on their own agenda, but we don't get too much of a focus on that. It's in the background. It's here the subtlety hurts the film, I think.
Well, I don't even think it's subtlety. I think it's just possibly something that got lost in translation from a novel and muddled through like a weird editorial lens. But I just thought of something now, like, wouldn't it be great if it turned out that the women who were kind of in the background or being abused or as Cara said, told to get in the kitchen, what if it turns out they had orchestrated, they were the ones, the power behind their kind of doofus wealthy husbands who thought they were the masters of the universe, but it turns out that it was the women who were making plans for the next evolution of the high rise or something. I don't know, but I'd want to watch that movie.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And I feel bad. I feel like I've been talking this whole episode. I apologize, but
It's your show, Mark.
yeah, well, yeah, but no, I want to make sure you folks have input. Go ahead, Cara.
I just got the impression you had more thoughts on the film than I did, which I was just scrambling to try and figure out how am I going to make sense of this thing, and am I going to have something to talk about other than I was confused the majority of the time.
Well, maybe it's the way my brain is wired. I don't know. I was just possibly trying to put the pieces together a bit, because I mean, you have the rebellion in here led by Wilder. You have, it's almost like the rich were too above stooping. The rich folks, the ones in the upper levels, think they were too high to stoop to the level, no pun intended, of the lower folks, but they end up all being the same and acting the same way, if not worse than the folks on the lower level. I mean, the folks on the lower level at least had some kind of, like, there was a night watch guy, kind of. He was the guy who was upset about the laundry chute constantly getting jammed. But you just have so many things going on. There's very little visual glue to put together the ideas, I think, for you to just sit down and watch this and hopefully get at least the first viewing of what all is going on. I mean, because especially with Lang, it didn't take long to suddenly Lang was barricading himself in his apartment and constantly looking at wanting to paint the apartment some other color for whatever reason.
I wanted to paint it this institutional gray. There's a better version of this movie, not exactly, but something that's showing like chaos and mayhem in a single location, things devolving over the time. Mother by Darren Aronofsky.
Yes. Yes.
But I think that movie works where this doesn't, because the metaphor for that is, it's basically a contemporary take on the Bible and a lot of those kind of events. So once you realize you're watching something that is a metaphor of scripture, you can kind of throw out, oh, well, this is supposed to say this about rich people, and this is supposed to be this about poor people. But on the same token, you can watch like literally things are on fire and people are barricaded behind couches and I think throwing grenades or something like that at the end of that movie. And that is some really cool looking chaos. And I don't know if there's a single orgy scene in that movie. I can't remember, but
I don't think there was an orgy scene. I enjoyed that movie quite a bit. That was my favorite of it. That was my favorite of that year, actually, which really made a bunch of eye twitches of the YouTube reviewerverse friends who all seem to hate it. And I'm like, I dig it, because everyone I talked to got something different out of Mother. They all gave a different interpretation, and that's what I loved about it. And none of them were exactly wrong with the way they interpreted it. It was like, that's the whole point with a film like that, is you can interpret different ways. And here, I think they're trying to go for it as well. And, I think it's just the idea that this was actually as part of civilization. I honestly think that if you take this whole concept and move it to like a remote location to where they're just all self-contained, it's decided to be this they to be their own little microcosm, their own little ecosystem of sorts, if you will. I think that puts all of the other pieces at least a little bit together, to where when you're watching the chaos, you're going, okay, they can get away with the buildup of the garbage because they're in the middle of nowhere. Okay, this can happen, because there's no one around. Suddenly, this disappears, and the body disappearing, I figured, was Royal's right-hand man, who doesn't like Lang too much. The enforcer guy, I figured he just took the body away, like they went and incinerated it. So that, for me, I guess I pieced together, was like, yeah, that's what happened to the body there. Royal must be paying the cops something serious for them to ignore everything that's going on. You're right about the phones too. I don't think there was a phone in the building.
I don't remember seeing one.
I don't remember seeing a phone in the building. which
Right.
could add to the whole idea. Now that you mentioned it, you know, that part they were cut off from. They
Right,
were all.
but
Go ahead.
let's just say this is 1975 London. Hey, you want to move into the building of the future? Sounds great. Oh, by the way, there's no phones. I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think now. I don't think there was a phone in the building.
No, they seem to only communicate with the outside world when people like left to
Left
go
to,
to their job, right?
which even had Lang's whatever assistant or secretary or whatever concerned when he was falling asleep in his office, because we get that idea later on as things are falling apart at the high rise. He's not getting any sleep, so he's sleeping at like his office or whatnot, and she looks concerned but doesn't say anything.
Again, like if I'm thinking real world, if for whatever reason Lang is he's not getting any sleep because there's orgies and fires at his apartment complex, instead of sleeping in his office, he is making really good money. He can go to a hotel for a
Yeah.
few nights or a week. Maybe while he's at that hotel, he goes to talk. He goes swings by the police station and says, "You know what? I think there were some cops over around a couple of days ago, but nothing seems to have happened. So, can I speak to your boss? Can I speak to internal affairs? Is there a federal? I mean, it's the UK, but is there? Let me talk to someone in Scotland Yard because there's some weird shit happening at the place that I just moved into. There's orgies going on and children involved somehow. Again, I'm looking at this as a story about people, and it's just not adding up.
Yeah, and it wasn't quite for me either. I knew what they were going for as far as within the context of the building. I honestly was taken out a bit by what he was trying to say whenever we got a view of one of these people in the outside world. That is when it kind of threw me out a little bit, because again, if they're cut off and that's it, makes so many things make so much more sense.
Well, I mean, there's a way, like you've mentioned it before, Mark, either secluded or post-apocalyptic or something. I mean, look at the idea right now. Today, you're looking at the concept of 15-minute cities.
Right.
These completely self-contained, you know, communities where you've
Mhm.
got everything you could possibly need within 15 minutes of each other. If they had that kind of idea and there was some kind of a separation, like jurisdiction, like literally
Mhm.
whatever is happening on your block. I mean, like look at Judge Dredd, Mega City 1 with these giant buildings and stuff. Like that is your business. If you got a problem, you deal with it in that community. No help from the outside or over here because it's cut off. There's a way to write this that's really smart and engaging and answers all these kind of nitpicky questions that prevent us from really engaging with the material. So when we're sitting here asking all these questions, even if they're just subconsciously like, I can't wrap my head around it. That's a phrase that came up earlier in the show. That shouldn't be a problem in a movie like this.
Yeah. I I know it sounds small, but for me, I think I grasp some of the stuff they were going for, but the brain just kicks in automatically when you bring that real world stuff in. It's
Hmm.
like, y- yeah, you're right. Why don't the people leave? Why doesn't somebody report something? I understand it's the 70s. I understand they're trying to make a statement about the government, but something that huge, like the sheer volumes of garbage built up around this high rise and whatnot, and they're just gonna look past it. They only had it was really hard to buy into that. And if you can't buy into that, then everything else starts to fall apart.
Well, I mean, you bring up a good point with government, right? I mean, this is a giant social experiment involving huge chunks of real estate, like on the outskirts of London.
Mhm.
You can't just be like a really wealthy businessman slash architect. I'm like, I'm just going to do this. No, you're going to have inspectors and bureaucracies and everything else involved checking in. If you want to make a statement like maybe they're all in the take, which, I'm kind of fine with if you want to put that in your story, but it belongs somewhere in the story.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I recently watched a film for my Patreon, which we're changing the tier up a bit. We've got a new special series going. I'll buy that for $1.25, to where I review a number of films I got from Dollar Tree. One of them that I got from Dollar Tree was a movie called Bab. It was from 2019. And that film was about this kind of rural town in the 40s and 50s being overrun and kind of controlled by this preacher. But it made sense, even though they didn't go into a lot of exposition. It was like a secluded town that not many people came through and whatnot. So the weird stuff that happens in town, you can kind of buy into it more. And for High Rise, and we'll wrap it up here because I feel like I've just talked too much. But for High Rise, there's a lot of commentary, a lot of social statements you can tell they're trying to go for. But it's the setting that just is hard to break away from things if this is supposed to be kind of real world. Even if it's a surreal world, the fact that they're touching the real world and real civilization really hurts what they were trying to go for, I think. But what do I know? I like, B movies too. So but no, just kidding. But yeah, I mean, so there you have it, folks. High Rise. There's a lot of high concepts here. I think it stumbles in the execution. I enjoyed it. I know I've got to watch it again. Maybe down the road, I'll visit it again to see if I can catch more things. But it does actually make me kind of want to read the book. It sounds like the book.
I just looked up. It's only 208 pages, so it's a.
Oh well, then I might actually read it. So
yeah.
So there you have it. Hope you found this at least interesting, folks. And what we're gonna do for the He's Not Loki episodes is just one question to my panel, and we'll see what they say. So Kara, we'll start with you. We're just gonna do it for this month for these episodes. So which was Tom Hiddleston better in? His role as Loki or his role as Dr. Lang?
I think that's at least for me, that's a very biased question because I'm so used to him as Loki, and this other one, I didn't see Loki at all, so he was believable as a different character versus watching him in Crimson Peak, and I'm like, that's Loki, get out of here.
Excuse me. Yes, that I had that kind of reaction to when I was watching. I like Crimson Peak, but yeah, it's definitely like you're like, nah, dude, you even got kind of the look yet. You got that Loki look here. He does it. So you're right. So Ian, what about you? Wang or Loki? Which did you like him better in?
Oh, this is hard because I'm gonna say I like him as Lang. Because I like Loki, but it's just the performance of it, because
Right,
it is
yep.
something different in terms of writing and characterization. Loki all the way, but it was nice to see Tom Hiddleston. I think that's what's been cool about this whole series you have going this month. For people who only know Tom Hiddleston as Loki or mostly know him as that, we had a great variety of types of characters, so you can watch them like, oh, this guy's a legitimate actor. He's not just a movie star in a comic book movie and TV series. So yeah, very fine line, but Lang for me on this one.
Fantastic. Yeah, me too. I like, as far as performances go, I like Lang a lot more because there's a few more layers to him here. Yes, I know comic book MCU fans, there's some layers to Loki, but not nearly as much as with the Lang character here. Watching him throughout this film and learning the different things and seeing his behaviors in that, and especially where you get to at the end of this film, which you get this gimmick at the end of High Rise 2 to where they're like, oh, I wonder what the next building is going to be like. I'm like, really? After all this, you think there's going to be people living in the next high rise next door? Really? Really?
Well, there you could stitch together your own cinematic universe where this is the prototype for Mega City 1 and the Judge Dredd movie. So the sequel to this would be Dredd with Carl Urban.
There you go. I'd watch that. Absolutely. Absolutely. So there you have it, folks. Hope this you might want to seek it out. Just be in the right headspace for it and realize that you're not going to have a lot of answers. You probably have more questions by the end of it, but yeah, it is an interesting film. I'm glad we got to watch it. I'm glad I saw it for Tom Hiddleston and his performance and the other stars in it. But it's definitely a quirky film that I think could have used a little bit more work. So there you have it. Thank you so much for listening, folks. Hope you've enjoyed this. Please subscribe if you haven't already to our YouTube channel as well as our podcast. We're on all kinds of podcast feeders, but enough of that. Now's the time for the license to shill. So my wonderful crew members who are very kind enough to come on our panel, they've got stuff to shill because they do their own thing. And so, Kara, go ahead. License to shill is yours. What do you got?
This Saturday on YouTube, same thing as my handle name at Horror Retrospective, I'm going to be discussing Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Oh, yes. Oh my God, so much fun. Alan Tynek, I can watch him in anything. Oh man,
That is
like
one of the few almost perfect movies. I love that film.
That is so hilarious. Such a wonderful film. That should be a fun conversation. So yes, check that out, folks, and don't forget to subscribe to her channel as well because her channel's awesome. So make sure you do that. And Mr. Ian Simmons, speaking of awesome, go ahead. License to shill is yours, sir.
Thank you. I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com and also on YouTube. Look for Kicking the Seat. This week, I'm going to be traveling, so I'm going to have some shows, I guess, in the can, edited, put together. I've got an episode on Saw X and Paw Patrol the Mighty movie. And then this coming Sunday, I'll be doing a live stream of Dario Argento's Dracula.
Ooh.
For its 10th anniversary. I quote unquote can't wait.
Oh boy. That's praying mantis Dracula.
Yes.
Oh. I've seen this film twice. So
I saw it once at the Chicago International Film Festival, if you can believe it, in 3D.
That's one of those where it's like, oh cool, Dario Argento film, and then everybody came out of it going,
nope.
That was Dario Argento? You sure it wasn't Dancing? You sure it wasn't Dancing?
I was excited about it until I watched it.
So was a lot of people. And then the praying mantis comes out, and then it's like, wait, what? What's going on here? Anyway, what doesn't have a praying mantis, but has got an interesting lineup, Sawdust City Fright Fest. I have something to plug. Coming to Oshkosh, the Time Community Theater in downtown Oshkosh, Wisconsin, if you're in the area, October 13th and 14th. We have the Sawdust City Fright Fest, where we have a wonderful series of independent shorts and feature films, all horror themed. The majority of them are from the Midwest or Wisconsin, but we do have some foreign ones in there as well. The 13th will be showing a short film called The Beast, which is interesting, very interesting, kind of cool film. And then we're going to be watching Friday the 13th Part 2 as part of the kickoff to this festival. And then Saturday, starting at 12:30, we've got 2 blocks of shorts and 2 features will be showing on Saturday. So a lot of fun. Sawdust City Fright Fest. Check it out. If you're in the middle of Wisconsin, it's a lot of fun. And you might see a familiar face. Or if that keeps you away, don't worry. I'll hide my face so you don't have to recognize me if me being there will keep you from going. I don't know. But in any case, thank you so much, all. And until next time, we'll just say good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.